Hey, what's up? Taylor Elwood here. And today I thought I would talk a little bit about why it's important to share your failures as well as your successes. And this comes out of that same email I got from the person who was like, "Hey, one of the things that she shared with me was that she didn't think it was a good idea to share my failures so publicly." And I thought, okay, I get that, but I'm very comfortable sharing my failures as well as my successes. And I honestly think that for the evolution of any discipline, magical or otherwise, it's better to share your failures and your successes. Now some people might say, well, as a result, I'm not going to, I'm not going to believe this person is as credible or whatever. But I think if anything, it actually boost your credibility when you're openly honest about what hasn't worked as well as what has worked. And a lot of times what I find is in occultism and magic, the tendency is for people to share their successes but not really talk about their failures. It's as if nobody ever fails at magic, And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I can tell you that I've not always had successes with my magical work, just like I haven't always had successes with my business stuff, and that's okay. I mean, it's just part of life. It's what you do with those failures that matters, not the fact that you've had them. And so, so, like in my books, I write about my magical experimentations, and I'll share what's worked as well as what hasn't worked and why it hasn't worked, and sharing what hasn't worked and why it hasn't worked can be just as illustrative as sharing what has worked. And if anything, it can be very helpful because at that point you are able to start taking apart what isn't working and start to figure out where's the disconnect, where's the gap, why aren't these things coming together the way that you think they ought to come together. And so in magical work or in anything else, if we want to truly become comfortable, I'm going to readjust this a little bit. There we go. If we want to truly become comfortable with what we're trying to do, we have to be willing to be critically honest with ourselves about what isn't working. And when we're not honest with ourselves, when we're not willing to take that look, that's when we get into the realm of delusion, and that's when we start to fool ourselves about the magical work that we're doing. When we're saying, "Oh, well, I always have successes," well, okay, that's great, but do you really? Chances are you don't. I mean, I can safely say that there have been times I've done magical workings where it didn't work out at all. And was that disappointing? Yeah, you better believe it. But if I wasn't willing to take a look at that and figure out what wasn't working and start making some changes and adjust and adapt it, then that would be the worst failure of all. If I continue telling myself, well, I'm always successful, that's great, and never took a look, I would be failing myself far more. And that's why I think that in your own magical practice, it's important to have some type of critical awareness about the work that you're doing. If you're going to be doing magical work and you're not willing to take that hard look at when your magic doesn't work, then you're really hurting yourself more than anyone else. And if, on the other hand, you're willing to take that look and you're willing to examine your own assumptions and your values and everything else that plays a role in the magical work and take apart everything to figure out why it didn't work, then that's where you ultimately become a better magician, because at that point you've owned that failure, you've learned from it, and you've used it to apply some type of meaningful change to your life. And that's what we really want. We want to meaningfully change our magical practice, meaningfully change our lives. And that only happens when we're willing to take that critical look and examine our awareness around what we believe about magic and what we know about magic versus what we've done, and seeing where the conflict comes into play. And I find that a lot of times that there usually is a conflict between what we know and what we're actually doing. And it's not always even that what we're doing isn't working. Sometimes it's what we know isn't working, and it runs it creates that kind of a conflict that causes things not to work as well as we would like. And as a result, I also think that if people are willing to share when things haven't worked out with their magical practice, when things haven't necessarily gone the way that they've wanted, if they're willing to share that with other people, I think the benefit of that is that that's how magic as a whole becomes a better practice. That instead of playing ego games where it's like, who's the better magician, instead we say, what can I do to improve myself as a magician? What can I do to take a look at what I'm doing and make it better than what it was? And that only happens with some kind of willingness to reflect, but also, in my opinion, some kind of willingness to share. Whether it's connecting with your local magical group or writing about it in a blog post or something else. I think that when we invite that kind of awareness around what we're doing and invite commentary, hopefully respectful commentary, what we end up getting as a result is something that allows us to truly refine what we're doing and how we're doing it. Right now, my own particular process, I'm looking at some things that haven't worked and why they haven't worked, and not all of it is necessarily magical, but it's one of those cases where by doing that, as hard as it can be, and sometimes as painful as it can be, it can also be truly liberating, because we're no longer locking ourselves into the delusion that we've told ourselves beforehand. And I think that is probably the most important thing we could give ourselves as a gift, is to be willing to face the sting of failure and be willing to embrace it in order to use it to liberate ourselves and become better, and to share that process of work with other people as well, in an effort to help them become better at what they're doing and what they can do. So, if by chance you end up watching this video later on, because this is a live one right now, feel free to comment below and share your thoughts. What are your thoughts on sharing your failures? What are your thoughts on owning your failures when it comes to magical work or otherwise? How do you do that? What's your process for that? All right, thanks for watching, and take care and have a great day.